Salutations and good evening, everybody, to The Velocity of Now with me, your host, Thomas Sheridan. Over the next 2 hours, we'll try to negotiate our way out of this often bizarre, but often wonderful reality, whatever reality is, that we're currently interpreting out of the swirl of the electromagnetic spectrum and the small fragmentary bandwidth that we as human beings are currently trapped within. As I said, my name is Thomas Sheridan. The website is www.thomassheridanarts.com. Lots of articles, information, news, events, all that kind of good stuff. If you want to help me out, I'd love it if you could buy a book or two. Even sharing my videos and articles on Facebook and Twitter even helps me. If you want to buy me a beer, that's great too. Now, this is the first show, I think, of 2014, I think, for the Type 1 Radio Network. I've got Steve here tonight, manning the controls. And it's a funny old transition over into the new year, I have to say. It's been a bit... I had a lot of fun this Christmas and stuff like that, but it's a funny old rollover time. It just is. Now, I don't know if that's the change in season or something, but I was like, I get very reflective this time of year. I usually start a major new project Christmas week, and I'll tell you why. I don't know if I think it may be the silence. Especially where I live, you get to understand how the world was in a pre-industrial, pre-technological time. And even though it's the darkest point of the year, even though, there's not many birds, occasional wrens and things like that, or many animals about, there's no leaves on the trees, and the grass tends to be either brown or if it's green, it'll be soggy and muddy. There's a sense of silence there that's intoxicating, I find anyway. And for whatever reason, it usually kickstarts me into my next major project, which I have begun. I'm writing my 4th book, which is a secret for a while. It'll be, I think it'll surprise a lot of people. It'll be a departure for me. It'll be more historical than anything else. I don't want to talk too much about it now, but at the same time, too, it is not and will not be a radical departure. It'll be a distillation of where I've come from in terms of my work into psychopathology and the control grid, then onto social engineering, and it will, dare I say, formulate into using that stuff to begin looking at the world in a slightly different way, what I might call a psychoesoteric analysis. So I'm quite excited about how it's rolling along so far. The research is pretty intense, and I'm enjoying it very much. It's a dark subject, but it's an important one because, as I said, the most important duty you can do as a human being for yourself now in the 21st century, and by extension a society, is to build a firewall around your consciousness that will help protect you from calamities, both personal and social, that may come down the road. We've heard people talk about the idea of a disease, a disease, a pathogen, an epidemic within the physical world in terms of a virus, in terms of a flu or a disease or whatever, or pandemic is the very fancy modern word we use. But there are other kinds of viruses. There are viruses of the consciousness, parasites of the psyche. And in some ways, these are even more virulent and spread more like wildfire and are more subject to great pandemics of the psyche than the biological or the physiological manifestations of what we would call disease. And we're starting to see the world more and more in that way. so much effort in the material world is given to the concepts of diseases spreading through multicellular organisms such as human beings, through our biology, but very little thought is given to the other kind of disease, the parasites of the consciousness that are equally as dangerous, can spread like wildfire. In fact, they can spread much more quickly. And where are the vaccines against them? Where are the methods and means to defend against them? They don't exist. The society is created so you become contaminated. Just as...
Yeah, you're back, Thomas. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Heidi Cole, for using your lovely talents there. Again, we're having problems with the weather here, folks. Please bear with me. This damp island is being battered at the moment, so if I go out again, just hold on, I'll try to come back. Now, as I was saying, that there's also viruses of the physiology, of the physical world, biological world. There's also viruses of consciousness, and how they're infected upon us would be just like as if the people in positions of our authority had TB and they coughed on us constantly. So that's what's happening in our consciousness. We're not being given psychic defenses against these pathogens of the mind. We're actually being made extra vulnerable to them. And if I could put any line underscore under my own work, it would be that that's what it's about ultimately, to help build an internal psychic immune system, to help people build an internal psychic immune system against the rubbish that we are subjected to. Other people have spoke about this idea of the mind virus, or Paul Levy's books, the Wetiko books talk about that. John Lash with the mind parasites, the archons. You can give them any name you want. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't even matter if they're actual conscious elements to it. The fact is we still exist and we still have to deal with these things. And that's what the next book is going to be about. But it'll be in a historical context, and I'll try to do the same things I've done in my 3 previous books. And it'll be, like I said, a distillation of where I've come and where we're going and where I'm going. Now, a lot of it had to do with the fact I spoke a few weeks ago about I saw the G4S logo and a bunch of soldiers around it in a small town near from here. And I got violently ill when it happened, and it was a very strange experience. And I've had some time since then to sit down and analyze it, and I now believe I've had basically what you'd call a psychedelic or a psychic experience. Now, there are ways to interpret psychic experiences that are usually good and bad, but I think this one, although it was a bad experience, I see it as the reverse. It was probably a sort of a kind of a psychic block inside my consciousness, and seeing that G4S logo and these heavily armed troops around it broke the damn walls open and has unleashed this next idea within me. Because, again, if we don't learn from the past, how can we ever defend ourselves in the future? It's not going to happen. So that's where I'm at the moment. I'm very deep into research. I'm very deep into writing, and hopefully I will have it out by the spring, a new book. I don't know how people will take it. That's okay. I write these things for myself, just like I paint for myself, just like I make music for myself. And if people like it, that's great. If they don't like it, that's cool as well. That's just how it is. I'm happy with everything. The process and the journey is what ultimately guides me. The destination will unfold, but I just want to make sure I myself have the psychic tools to deal with the destination, whenever that destination is, and possibly help other people deal with the same. Now, I was knocked out by the weather then, and that's another thing that's quite bizarre at the moment, is the weather. I saw some photographs there. I think it was minus 53 in Manitoba in Canada. And they had similar temperatures in the sort of like the northern part of the United States and central Canada. I just couldn't imagine that kind of cold. You see some of the photographs. I saw a picture today of a car frozen. It literally was surreal. And another one in Minnesota of basically the ice coming through the doorway in a school building, I think it was. And you get this impression, this concept of encroachment. You know, the ice queen, it's coming, you know, these kinds of like allegories. It sort of feeds that part of my imagination. And looking at pictures of icebergs and stuff. And, well, we were told global warming was coming. I've seen pictures of Irish environmentalist magazines that have had illustrations of what Ireland would look like in 2020 on the cover of the magazine, and it looked like basically North Africa, like Algeria, a little bit of green. That was basically it, and everything else is brown and dusty. Now, this global warming thing has been an absolute catastrophic disaster for science. I think a poll came out this week that most Americans no longer trust scientists, and one of the big reasons for that was how they lied about the global warming thing, and how they unashamedly nailed their colours to the mast of the rapidly sinking and sunk SS Al Gore, or should I say the rapidly frozen in the iceberg SS Al Gore. But did they fail? Did they lie? Yes. But did they know the truth? Or were we being sold something much deeper than a taxation scam? Do you know how the great priests and the great holy men got their power in the past? By watching the stars. They watched the cycles of the sun, the moon, and the stars. And at some point, quite a few clever men and women figured out that when an eclipse would happen on a certain date, it would happen again on a certain date in the future. Being very ingenious, they discovered that they could actually predict, this is a long time ago now, we're talking thousands of years ago, when eclipses could happen again, when eclipses were due to come back. That gave them tremendous power because they could do things well. They gave the ones who were the psychopaths among them and the psychopathic rulers who found out about the system among them great power. I'm sure many of the original men and women who were working on these tables didn't see a pernicious agenda or necessity or opportunity, shall we say, when this was going on at first. And they would predict the eclipse would come on a certain date, and people would be amazed. Or if they were psychopaths, they would say, if you don't do as we say, tomorrow we will make the sun go black to show you our magic is so powerful. And the sun would go black, and that's how basically the churches were, the religions and the priests, right through to the Vatican of the day, got their power. That's how they infused their incredible power in the minds of ordinary human beings, and likewise royalty did the same. Then they got control. Do what we have to do. Don't make the sun go away. Has the world changed? Are the psychopaths of today any more altruistic and benevolent than they were 3,000-4,000 years ago? Or would they, hypothetically speaking, pull off the same bullshit? Putting on my tinfoil hat, which I have to say, and anyone who knows me, it sits in the wardrobe a lot of the time gathering dust. It takes a lot for me to be conspiratorial. And I'm not saying this is happening, but I will throw this out there because it's happened in the past, and the eternal psychopath never changes, and they're still in power. What? Now let's sit back for a second and think, let this one sink in. What if they knew that we were getting a new ice age? And then they thought to themselves, how can we take advantage of this? Well, we all know they're lunatics. We're obsessed with population reduction, even if their population projection numbers and the impact on the world and environment is psychotically overinflated to even a child can see that they're lying. They just want to trim down the workforce to cull the farm animals. Oh, it doesn't happen. Oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. Listen to me. Listen to me. You are living on a farm. You are a piece of livestock. You are no more valuable or sacred to your masters in the corporations than Colonel Sanders holds one of his chickens sacred in the battery farm. You let that sink in. So they knew an ice age was coming. Hypothetically, I'm just throwing this out there, blowing smoke out my ass. I'm not saying it's a fact. It's just something I'm thinking about. The winters have been ferocious. The summers haven't been exceptionally hot. Complete opposite of what they told us. Ice age approaching. You get Gardener's World on the BBC, guys like Joe Swift saying, you know, we got to plant lots of orange groves in our gardens to deal with climate change, as he talks that weird kind of lisp. Think about that one. Make your houses more like Mediterranean villas. Open courtyards, dig your garden up. Hey, it's going to be nice and warm. And people think to themselves, well, if there's going to be global warming in the future, well, why will I bother with double glazing? Why do I have to bother with burying the pipes below the frost line? Why do I have to bother with extra insulation in the attic? Why do I need a lawn? Why do I need a yard? I'll just make a Mediterranean court garden and live off the oranges that the BBC Gardener's World told us we would be picking. And so, shut down the power stations. Why do we need coal power stations? We have the wind to turn the turbines. And they turn and they turn. And they generate pitiful amounts of electricity until the ice seizes them up. The hydroelectric dams, they don't work when the rivers freeze. But we were going to get global warming. But we're not. Because the Arctic ice sheet this year has recorded its largest ever increase since records began. The bloody thing is now heading down towards New Brunswick in Canada. It's encroaching upon southern Greenland. And you think of Al Gore in his ridiculous movie that he won the Nobel Peace Prize for, elevating like a god in his cherry picker as he zoomed up the global increases in temperature to tell you that we were roasting the earth alive and we were heading towards global warming. Knowing maybe inside as he moved to Florida and lots of them moved to Venezuela, hey, wouldn't Libya be a good place to live if we did have an ice age? Libya would be the new France. It would be the new Ireland. It would be the new Great Britain. It'd have a lovely temperate climate. North Africa would be lovely. They have to deal with those Muslims first, of course. We move south. The American ones all move south to Venezuela. European elites all move down to North Africa. And everything's great. And the ice continues to encroach. And you're sitting in there in, I don't know, in your suburb, and you're looking out at the patio with the orange grove trees on it that BBC's Gardener's World told you would have to plant because, well, traditional British apple trees wouldn't work anymore in the super hot weather. And remember, it might not even be a full ice age. It might be a mini ice age like they had in the 1500s, where they still had normal summers, but they had to make enormous provisions to grow food in a very short time frame in order to build it up for the winter, as well as get as much coal and so on out of the ground. Chop wood. Where have all the forests gone? Why are all the coal mines closed? And sitting on top of them are pitiful wind turbines, waiting for the ice to freeze. Freeze the blade solid. Global warming, folks. Is it coming? I don't know. I don't see any sign of it. I'm seeing much more proof that it's getting colder. The winters seem to be getting more severe, particularly in the North American continent. There's a deep, deep freeze there. I know we've got cold times in the past. I know in the late 1940s, Northern Europe was hit with a very cold spell. But then temperatures actually climbed again. The Druids and the priests and the holy men, they said, do as we say, or the sun won't come back tomorrow. Pay your carbon taxes and you won't roast to death. Do you really, really trust them enough to believe that the world hasn't changed and the eternal psychopath has somehow, over the course of time, modified themselves into a better, more humane subspecies? Or have they only learned to specifically target more effectively their trade using technology and bombarding the psyche of the human being, that we don't have an anvil shaped to our own needs and desires, but shaped to their own agenda, and we don't have a consciousness firewall because we depend on their media to tell us how to feel, how to think, and how to make provisions for the future. Well, you remember that one next time you're driving by or walking by one of those giant wind turbines, and you would say to yourself, they'd be great in hot weather, but what would happen if the hot weather didn't come and we had a deep freeze that lasted 8 or 9 months a year? Now this is the first song, and it's called Waiting for the Medicine by Barry Hawk. That was Barry Hawkin, Waiting for the Medicine. His philosophy is now Thomas Sheridan. There won't be a show next week. Where will I be? I'll be in Germany this time next week. So there'll be a pre-recorded show or something on then, just to let you know about that. Speaking of the future, in the second hour of the show, I'm going to be talking about the sci-fi agenda. People, we had sci-fi, science fiction. Who, why, what, and who was behind it. I'll also be reading you a short science fiction story, and you can give me about 15 minutes to let me read that to you, and we're going to have a little discussion on what sci-fi is, what sci-fi means. If you want to call into the show, do so in the next half an hour. You can click this call button on Skype, and there's also a US number that you'll see there on the Skype page. It's a free call or a local call in the US and Canada, I think. But if you're anywhere else, if you want to call in, have a chat, the next half an hour is the time to do it. I was just talking there about the Ice Age and stuff. There's some incredible storms hitting here right now. We had a bit of a power outage at the beginning. We might have it again during the shows. Just stay, just hang on. Just hang on, I'll be back. Hopefully I'll be back. Well, the world is a very strange place. And we assume that we have a sense of consciousness that's pretty much universal everywhere. It's all universal. But your consciousness, folks, is ultimately, all of us, is a product of experience. It's an experiential idea. What you've been exposed to is what your consciousness in this reality builds itself upon. And so you can't really compare someone of today to someone of years ago. Except psychopaths, I don't think they've ever changed. I think they're just stuck in the one state forever. This is our fatal mistake. We assume that they have developed human rights and everything else like the rest of us. And no, they don't. They just don't kill us because, they'll go to jail if they're caught. That's the only reason they don't do it. Now, we hear so many stories about pilots landing back in the 1940s and whatever in remote Pacific islands, and the people on those islands thought that they were their gods. They thought that they were their gods. Like there was a famous case of an American transport plane that basically landed on some island. They landed in a field. It was somewhere in the South Pacific, or in maybe up towards New Guinea area. The natives had never seen a plane, and they thought that they were gods. They thought that this was their gods arriving. And we can laugh at those people and say, they're so backward, they never saw an airplane before. That they think this is their gods. Well, I got news for you. If they had the technology to put a gigantic Jesus in the sky, or a big alien UFO, they could fake one, or fake a load of them that were realistic looking enough. I guarantee you that most of the people would be like living in fear of worshipping them as gods. It's only our experience of having seen an airplane and know what it is and knowing how it works is what puts us in the sort of, snooty position of laughing and looking down at these folks who never saw an airplane before. Their experience, their consciousness is based on an experience that hasn't been fully expanded to the level of ours. Now, that doesn't mean they're less intelligent or less worthy or less wise than us. They're just working in a framework that we're not exposed to. By the other hand, they probably had a phenomenal understanding of the nature of their islands, things that we wouldn't have a clue about, where to find the medicines and all this other things, and what you could eat and what you couldn't eat, and how to survive on nothing, and make fire from nothing, and all that, and build a house from nothing. We don't have that, so they would laugh at us. It's always an exchange, Remember, energy is always about exchange. So these American pilots were the gods. They were, and the American pilots, they were very embarrassed by it. I remember seeing a documentary about it. They were very embarrassed. But that's how they were treated. It was just an amusing thing. They didn't take advantage of these people or anything like that. It was all very nice and friendly. And the same thing happened with Christopher Columbus. He almost practically fulfilled the prophecy that the Mayas and the Aztecs had, which is kind of frightening in itself. Of these guys coming from the west, from the east. Now, with all this in mind, there was a story in the Christmas version of 14 Times, which is a magazine I know a lot of you don't like for some reason. Well, it's still my favorite magazine because it's the kind of skepticism that I like. It's open-minded, but it's not batshit crazy, and it's skeptical, but it's not fanatical. There's a story in this called The Prince Philip Worshippers of Tanna. And a guy called Matthew Bayliss travelled 10,000 miles to visit the volcanic South Sea island of Tanna, home to a cult that worships, wait for it, the Duke of Edinburgh, airborne virus himself. On my travels around the world, I've seen sacred objects stored and displayed in every way, from roomside tabernacles to tiny spirit houses, medieval test tubes and golden pagodas. This was the first time I came across a sacred biscuit tin. Jack Navina, chief of the Yanohananan village, led me down a bush path enclosed by thick green vegetation, throbbing with birds and insects, and we crossed a theatrical-looking Nakamau, the circular meeting place ringed by gnarled and ancient binding trees, and into the tiny village beyond. He had me sit on a simple log bench outside the quarters, which weren't any grander than the other squat reed huts we could see. He disappeared inside, and shortly after, a roar was followed by a smacking sound, and then the squeals of a piglet exiting the premises at high speed. The chief himself then emerged, having exchanged his usual tracksuit top and sarong combo for a traditional Tanadunus leaf-shaped penis sheath. He had something under his arm. I'll admit it, on the succession of aeroplanes, I'd entertain myself with visions of what I would find out of the Pacific Isle of Tanna, fonded taboo houses and smoking altars, wooden replicas of Buckingham Palace, wickerworks effigies of the Duke of Edinburgh, Union Jacks flying from every mandarin trees and coconut palms. The mildewed contents of an old cream cracker box couldn't quite compare. Then again, there was still something miraculous about this old man. In a mountain village on a remote Pacific island, proudly displaying a collection of newspaper clippings about the royal family, there were bits about Charles and his organic farm, outrage over Prince Harry and his drunken antics in a Nazi uniform, and of course Chief Jack's god, Prince Philip, offending entire nations, presiding over unspeakably dull committees, allegedly bumping off his daughter-in-law. How did you get this stuff? Friends around the world said it. Sorry, I tugged at my ear. Perhaps I misheard. He might have said Ken Todd, or Kent Odd. He simply can't have meant Ken Dodd, the Mersey Mirthmaker, blood buck-toothed king of the Diddy men. That was too weird, even for Tanna. I have his book inside, the chief went on. I will show you. He didn't, though, because it was an instant. A great joyous sweaty work party filled the village, and women loaded up with sugar canes, and the men came swinging their machetes about like flags. Among them was Cal, Nadia's number 2 son, fierce as ever, fixing me with a policeman's stare. He murmured something in his father's ear, glaring at me all the while. In the meantime, the villagers settled around us in an unexpected sooty huddle. The Tanesse had a pretty relaxed schedule: feed the pigs, a bit of hoeing in the yam gardens, mending the odd fence. Then there was plenty they left for chewing the fat, supping their favourite narcotic, and dreaming up the new religion around Prince Philip. Somehow, it came to pass in the 1960s that these people came into contact with Prince Philip. We sent them a signed photograph, and incredibly as it sounds, Prince Philip is now considered the god on this South Sea island. Yes, Mr. Airborne Virus himself. is now a god among these people. And a British comedian called Ken Dodd, even one of his books is considered sacred, a sacred relic among these people. Now, there's so many fucking lessons in this to be learned, folks, that if you can't see the potential for irony extending throughout the course of human civilization to the very present, then that's really, you need to look a bit more deeper. If Prince Philip can become a god to people on a South Sea island, it shows you the power of a limited consciousness being overseen and influenced by a greater idea or concept that's alien to them. We have that here today. Zachariah Sitchin and his Nibiru and his Anunnaki has as little or no substantial proof connected to it beyond his own research. Yet millions of people around this world believe there is a planet called Nibiru. They believe that this group called the Anunnaki came to Earth and there was some kind of genetic interference with human beings. And all this other stuff based on one guy's interpretation of the Babylonian cruciform script, which no other scholar agrees on. No one. It's purely his unique and singular interpretation that we had alien gods in the past visit this planet, and you can't laugh at these people who worship Prince Philip as a god, because it's exactly the same bloody thing. It's exactly the same thing. Your limitations of your consciousness in not fully knowing how to decipher Babylonian cruciform, your limitations of your consciousness not fully understanding Sumerian history, has people believing that Zachariah Sitchin was telling historical fact with little or no zero proof. Entire careers, entire industries, entire mythologies have been built upon it, and it's no more or no less silly than these people in Tana worshipping Prince Philip as their god. It's the same thing. You think about that one. So from that, you have this whole idea of alien gods, this Anunnaki, experimentation with human beings, and somehow along the way, I still can't figure out, that was converted into something to do with reptilians. I won't go any further than that. But then what happens then is you get an element of confirmation bias. And this confirmation bias revolves around finding ancient drawings of ancient creatures that maybe half man, half lizard, and saying, or griffins and all these things, or serpent people, and saying, there's your proof, all through history, they have reptilian beings. Well, you know what else they have? They have human bird hybrids. They have human lion hybrids. They have human cat hybrids. But in the world of the confirmation bias of the reptilian agenda and the Anunnaki agenda, these are all dismissed. They're all dismissed. They're somehow not relevant. Only the ones that are snaky lizard people, dino people, are relevant. All the others are not relevant. Let me create a mythology for you right here, right? Here we go, right? A group of aliens descended upon this planet from Neptune, okay? They were seahorse people. They altered our DNA, and we are a result of it. and I can prove it. How can I prove it? I'll tell you how. There's a part of the human brain called the hypothalamus. It looks just like a small seahorse. This was the seahorse peoples had left this in our brain, just like the reptilian people had left the reptilian complex in our brain. There's your first piece of proof that my theory of seahorse people from Neptune. Second one, seahorses appear all over mythology. Look at them. They're everywhere. Seahorses. They're everywhere. Everywhere you look in mythology. Seahorses. Royal regalia. Seahorses. They come from Neptune, the god of the sea. More proof. The royal family love horses. Real horses. Royal Ascot. Royal Ascot is rooted in an ancient Sumerian seahorse people tradition of racing the seahorses. And because they became, that would have been 5,000 years ago in Babylonia, they would have been seahorses running across the plains of Sumeria. But because they've successfully interbred with human beings and we're human beings, except for the proof that we're seahorse people, DNA experiments because of the hypothalamus in our brain, we now watch Royal Ascot. And Royal Ascot is a Sumerian tradition of the seahorse. And the royals are all involved in it. And the royals love racehorses. But these seahorse people were cannibals. And that's why Princess Anne has told us to eat more horse meat. In fact, Findus, the company that was selling the mincemeat lasagna that had horse in it, Findus sounds very, very much like a Sumerian word. Finno. You see, it's proof. And any gaps that you can't fill in that story, that you can't make work, guess what? We live in a holographic matrix. And that's your insurance policy that makes it all okay. We have to be very, very careful that we are not led down paths that are just flights of fancy built upon confirmation bias, upon layers of convenient evidence used versus unfortunate evidence ignored. Don't believe anything. Don't believe me. Don't believe anything. Keep questioning, keep asking. Anyone can build a good yarn in this day and age with the resources we have. We may be laughing at these people who worship Prince Philip, but the people who think that the royal family are lesbians, reptilians, they're laughing at you too. Same reason. You've limited your consciousness into a paradigm of confirmation bias where everything has to validate Zachariah Sitchin's Anunnaki, reptilians, whatever, all these other bloody things that have to make us believe that aliens have visited this earth. Eric von Daniken was a supreme bullshitter. A supreme bullshitting snake oil salesman of a level that's even hard to comprehend. He took photographs of graphics that were only a certain distance and said they were runways for aliens. Why would aliens who could travel those kinds of distances need a bloody landing spot? They wouldn't even think about it. They wouldn't even have spacecraft. They could fold consciousness. They could travel through consciousness. They wouldn't need it. They simply wouldn't need it. It's a strange thing when you meet people who refuse to give up these things based on an unnecessary affection for a certain author who's pushing the idea, or filmmaker, or because they bought into the idea it proves everything for them. We're now into the domain of religious faith. It's not good. Yes, I do believe there are supernatural concepts. Yes, I do believe there are things outside our understanding currently, and probably always will be. Yes, I do believe that people have incredible experiences. But here is the rub. The interpretations of those experiences are everything. Everything. We know Prince Philip is a pompous Nazi, German, bigoted asswipe. A consort to a queen. We know he's a buffoon who makes bizarre racist comments to people that he meets of different races. And there's very good evidence to suggest he was involved in the assassination of his daughter-in-law. Allegedly. But he's not a god. We laugh at the idea that he's a god. But on this island in the South Pacific, the South Seas, they don't laugh at the idea he is a god. And they have a confirmation bias of news clippings and even a Ken Dodd book. Even a Ken Dodd book, another BBC entertainer, to prove it for them. As above, so below. Human beings and human experiences are very similar no matter where you go, no matter what you do. Your holy men can be people either deliberately or accidentally misinterpreting Babylonian's cruciform script. And from that you would have priests who would build industries upon that, of alien visitations. And you know what I find most offensive about all this? Is that it leaves human beings out of the equation. When I hear people talk about aliens built the pyramids, I get extremely, extremely offended as a human being. Because I know human beings built the pyramids. I know human beings carved those stones out of Baalbek. I know human beings, through their ingenuity, did all that stuff. Thousands of years ago, using a technology, working in masonry and stone that has been lost ever since. Human beings just like you and me did that. Human ingenuity. Who knows how they moved the stones? Sound? I don't know. I know humans did it. No sky fairies required. No sky fairies in the forms of reptilian gods from other planets required. And no sky fairies in the form of Prince Philip required. It's all the same thing when you start to look at it. And when you can put yourself in the position of those people who worship Prince Philip, you realise just how bloody stupid your own ideas might be and your own sacred concepts. Because you don't have enough experience. Someone once said to me, do you think that there's bases on the moon? And I said, well, I've never been there. And he got really upset and rolled his eyes. And he says, well, of course I know you've never been there. But do you think there's bases on the moon? And I said, I don't know. I've never been there. And that's the difference between fate and remaining neutral. Any subjective or objective notion of Nazi bases or whatever on the moon would purely be a fate-based concept, an assumption with a bit of confirmation bias of vril flying saucers getting the Nazis there. But until you set foot on that moon and have a look around, you don't know nothing. You don't know nothing. Just like the people on that island don't know nothing about Prince Charles, Prince Philip, and the rest of them. They're distant gods. In the second half of the show, we're flying along tonight, I'm going to be extrapolating a bit more of this idea and examining it more in terms of 20th century science fiction and the history of how science fiction was developed and what it tells us Are we being entertained, or are we being given a blueprint? Hail Prince Philip! Next song, Time Worms by A Wild Nobility.